UCF has got to step the passing game up this year, but how high do the Knights have to climb?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend, Andrew Gluco, senior writer, UCFKnightZone.com, to talk a little UCF football. So we've been talking a lot of basketball for it to be spring practice, but football, we're talking football, American football on today's show. Look, the passing game has got to improve. How much does the passing game have to improve, and how much do the receivers have to improve for the passing game to improve, and where can they finish when it's all said and done? We're going to talk about all that on today's show, which is brought to you by our title sponsor, Mazda. They're making cars that get you from A to B. Mazda, move and be moved. UCF has got to move and be moving these passing numbers in the right direction, Andrew. It was terrible last year. How terrible was it? Let's take a look at the numbers from 2025. I had to extend this chart just to get Taven Jackson in there, by the way. Because normally I would just do like the top 10, but it was tough trying to get my guy in there. So we went all the way back to 12, which is where Taven finished. 63.5% completion percentage, only 2,100 yards passing. Now, he missed I wouldn't say a significant amount of time, but enough to make a dent to injury, and Cam Fancher had to pick up some of that slack there. But he was the 12th best passer in the Big 12 by yards. The number one was Sawyer Robertson, who was an absolute freak at Baylor, 3,681 yards passing. Again, for our listeners on pod, coming in at number two at TCU was Josh Hoover, 3,472 yards passing. Noah Fivita comes in at 3,228 yards passing. Bear Bachmeyer, guy we know well, 3,033 yards passing. And then Brendan Sorsby was number 5 with 2,800 yards passing. He's no longer at Cincinnati, but he is still in conference at Texas Tech. I'm going to stop there. As I mentioned, our guy way down at 12. Alonzo Barnett III has got to move UCF up this particular list. Andrew, he passed for, let's take a look at his numbers right. He passed for 2,806 yards last year, 23 touchdowns against only 8 interceptions. He would have been the 5th best passer in conference last year. Before we started recording, you feel like he maybe just has to do this for UCF to move the needle significantly in the passing game here in 2026?
I do. Remember, he's a dual threat quarterback. So he's got legs. He's going to rack up some yardage there. And then you have a running game too. UCF does not have to lean completely on the pass. That's one of the strengths in UCF in recent years is the running game. Even if the offensive line struggled, there was a talented group behind, in the backfield that could carry the ball. And I think we're going to see some good running backs this year. Obviously a new core of guys, obviously Tavian Swint, the freshman who missed last year due to injury, he's back. But other than that, it's really a new cast of characters in the backfield, including Barnett. But Barnett had over 600 yards rushing last year. And you got to take that into account. The big thing with UCF was not the number of yards that they put up. It was the ability to push it in short yardage situations. They struggled on the goal line. And if this team does just what Barnett did last year, and they can convert those short yardage situations into points, if the defense does even remotely close to what they did, they're going to win games. They're going to win a bunch of games. And they were close. As we've talked about, there were 3 games left on the field easily. And you can make compelling arguments on other ones that could have changed its complexion if the offense was just more competent. But they were vastly inconsistent and struggled in the red zone. So if Barnett and company can put out similar output to what like he's already done and what some of these other players have already done, and just convert where it matters in the red zone, I think the rest will kind of play itself out.
Inconsistencies are a progress killer, and they have been for UCF in the passing game, not just under Scott Frost last year, but this goes back to Gus, where yeah, I mean they burned through 4 quarterbacks in Gus's last year, and nobody got hurt. So that stat blows my mind. I can't remember last time I saw a team go to their 4th string quarterback for poor play. But that's what UCF was at. They bet a lot on KJ Jefferson. He came in, immediately flopped, got benched, and then it was just, can we find anybody who will throw this thing even remotely efficiently? Look, they think Alonzo Barnett solves that problem for them so they can move on to solving other problems. Because on the other side, your top receiver didn't score a touchdown last year because your passers were so poor. I don't put that on Dwayne Thomas Jr. Now, we're going to get to our next segment where we'll talk about the other end of this. Who's catching the ball for Alonzo Barnett III, and will they be able to do it at a high enough level for UCF to move the passing game forward? Let's talk about that next right here on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our title sponsor, Mazda. This is Mazda moving the game forward. For those who know, the score never tells the whole story. Look, when you look at the scoreboard for UCF football last year, it didn't tell the whole story. They were a great football team that played great defense, and they got a chance to really move the game forward here in Scott Frost's second year. There's more to these UCF football players than the highlights that you saw. The early mornings, late night runs, constantly showing up for their squad on and off the football field. The all-new Mazda CX-5 moves the same way, with more space to connect, a bold new design, and more intuitive technology so you can stay connected to the road. And every position you play, the all-new Mazda CX-5 is there to get you there. There's more to every side of you because there's more to a Mazda. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your tax situation this tax season. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations worldwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. TurboTax, get it done with our friends at TurboTax. Locked On UCF listeners, we have a special offer for you, and it's the UCF Everydayer Club. Head on over to lockedonucf.supercast.com to get signed up today. It's only $5, and for those $5, you get an ad-free feed of the show. You also get entry into a members-only Discord where you'll find myself, and maybe Andrew, maybe James, maybe Kyle, and other UCF fans like yourself chopping it up about UCF sports 24/7. Again, head on over to lockedonucf.supercast.com to get signed up today. All we ask is that you listen, but if you want to go a step further and support the work that we're doing here at Locked On UCF, sign up for the Everydayer Club. Again, lockedonucf.supercast.com to get signed up today. Andrew, the passers have to improve, but the receivers, I don't know if they have to improve, but hopefully Alonzo Barnett is creating opportunities for guys like Dwayne Thomas Jr., he decided to return. I like him a lot, mostly because he used me and you in his return announcement video, but he was a great receiver last year. I thought he was a talented receiver that didn't get a ton of opportunities to show off what he could do. Let's take a look at the leading receivers in the Big 12 last year. I could not stretch this chart far enough to get Dwayne Thomas Jr. in there. He was the 27th best receiver in conference last year by yards. Here are the top 16. I can't stress it. There are teams with multiple guys on this list before you get to 16, and UCF doesn't have one. Not one guy even in the top 16. If you're wondering why the top 16, it's just as many guys as I could fit on here before I ran out of space. I still couldn't get a UCF receiver on this list, man. This is pathetic. Look at it. What BYU has, what TCU has, how many guys on this list? I think they got like 3 or 4 guys on this list. BYU has like 3 or 4 guys on this list. Baylor has like 3 or 4 guys on this list. What is up here? This is crazy to me that UCF was unable to get a guy in the top 15, 20, not even the top 20 and receiving. Is that how bad this passing game was last year?
Well, I mean, like a lot of things, consistency was a problem. You look at Dwayne Thomas, led the team, 53 catches, 528 yards, but never saw the end zone. And that was, I think, largely because of how he was utilized. He was kind of utilized as the guy that you would throw the wide receiver screens to, and he would get most of his yardage after the catch. He was the yak guy. And I think, and part of that, we go back to the struggles of the red zone. So, if the team can't move the ball in the short field, a guy who's getting screen passes is not going to score touchdowns.
That's a very, very good point. Again, no touchdowns for Dwayne Thomas Jr. last year, to further your point. He didn't score a single touchdown, and he was your best receiver.
He was the best receiver on this team. And when you look at like who's back statistically, yards wise, the top 3 Knights yard wise are back. You have Dwayne Thomas Jr., number 1, Dylan Wade, who had an outstanding season at tight end. And then the freshman Waden Charles is 3rd on the team in receiving. He only had 290 yards and no touchdowns himself. So you had a number of other guys just kind of scattered there. DJ Black, he left through the portal. And then you had Chris Domerkant, who was basically a rental, and Marcus Burke. And then Miles Montgomery's in there. Obviously, he graduated. So you have a lot of opportunity. Now, UCF has some talented players that did not get opportunities. Like Day Farmer missed this past season with an injury. He was a highly touted transfer from West Virginia. He's going to get a chance. You have a redshirt sophomore Jordan Bridgewater, who's really talented, who should get more playing time. And then another redshirt sophomore, Caleb Rollerson, who had little sporadic play here and there. That's just some of the guys who are returning. To see how those guys, how they come out. Josh Derry, the transfer from Monmouth, who's the senior. High expectations for Derry as one of those elder statesmen as far as age and experience. Maybe not so much at UCF, but just in general. We've already seen that you can be a new player at UCF and still carry a very prominent leadership role. That comes back to personality. There's certainly room for opportunity. And I think a player like Josh Derry plays a major, major role. And I can see him lining opposite, on the other side of the field from a Dwayne Thomas or a Dylan Wade, and really help open that passing game up.
Well, we had Derry here on this show. I mean, I like his game a lot. I like all the leadership qualities that Scott Frost and company probably saw in him when they decided to recruit him from Monmouth. But, the opportunities have to be there. I think these guys are going to love playing with Alonzo Barnett based on what they went through last year. Go back and watch that playoff game versus Oregon with JMU and Oregon. Barnett showed up. He showed up. He didn't have enough dogs around him for them to even threaten to win that game. But at UCF, I think they, both sides will benefit from each other. He's going to play with the best set of receivers he's probably ever played with in his career. And they are going to play with a much better quarterback than they had last year. And it's not even close. I think that he is. So I still believe that he has a chance to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 next year. And everyone's sleeping on him now. We're projecting this is all based on potential, Andrew, but he's good. He is good. And if you believe that when we did our top 5 list of quarterbacks in the Big 12 here, you and James pretty much had the same list. Sorsby moving from Cincinnati to Texas Tech, Bachmeier, an incumbent at BYU, along with Dampier, who was the 10th best quarterback in the conference by yards. When we look at our list here, let me go back to the passing yards leader. Yeah, Dampier coming in there at 10. I want to note Dampier was the only quarterback in conference with over 800 yards rushing, in the top 10 of the conference in rushing as well too. So he is a real threat both with his arms and with his legs. But going back to the list here, Fivida returns, and there are some guys on this list. He was the 3rd best passer in conference. And then Mestemaker, who was the nation's leading passer by yards, albeit in the American last year at 4,100 yards. Drew Mestemaker, he is now at Oklahoma State. So I'm going to go back to the list one more time here. I don't think our guy Barnett has to be a 4,000-yard passer for this to be a success. He just needs to be in the area of 3,000 yards, and UCF is going to have a pretty good. So they'll hit the over. They'll hammer the over, I think, if he can get anywhere near 3,000 yards.
I have an X factor for you.
Okay.
How many seniors are on this wide receiver core? 2, and that's Derry and Thomas. Everyone else are underclassmen. So there is a lot of youth in this wide receiver room. And so that's a bit of a double-edged sword. So you have higher potential as far as growth, but you may have a slightly larger handicap to, when the season starts. That forces a player like Barnett to have to take more of a leadership role. Now, quarterbacks are usually viewed as the leader. So I don't think it's anything he can't do. But it's certainly something that has to be, noted, that this is a young wide receiver room. The fact that you only have 2 seniors and most of them are freshmen and sophomore. I don't think there's any juniors actually on this in the wide receiver group. I don't think there's any juniors. I think they're all freshmen and sophomore, between true freshmen up to redshirt sophomore, which is nothing short of unbelievable. I mean, like that's just wild that you have 2 seniors and that's it. No other upperclassmen at all. So Barnett's gonna have his work cut out for him, but that's where Derry and Thomas really need have an opportunity to shine. And then you have Dylan Wade in there too. Those 3 guys are gonna have to really set the pace. But while we do have a room in front of us that is very young, Scott Frost and crew have youth, which is very malleable. They do have talent, and Scott Frost was able to get some of those guys out there in the field. Wade and Charles played very, very meaningful minutes, so there's gonna be a lot of expectation as far as what Charles can do. And we talked about Rollerson and even some other players like Bridgewater and Farmer, who obviously Farmer missed the season, but these are other players that have a lot of talent, but just they're not proven, on the field in the college, level. And so I think that's one reason why UC has been dogged so much. You look at the Vegas odds. We talked the 5.5 wins from FanDuel. CBS has UCF as a 3-win team. Yeah, I'm not joking.
CBS canceled CBS in 2026. What? A 3-win team?
It's
3.
I think it's because on paper there's so much unproven, but
a 3-win team though.
There's so much below the surface, and if Scott Frost can get over that hump of the close win scenario, where those few wins they kind of left on the field, if he can get over that hump, because it dogged him badly at Nebraska, and change the narrative, I think that this will really set the stage. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out UCF as a school, as a football run, and just the attitude of the entire academic and athletic level, operates better when they have a chip on their shoulder. UCF has always been kind of an underdog school, kind of below some of the bigger name schools in Florida. Well, you know what? That actually feeds them, and it helps them play a little angrier, work a little harder. And we've seen the results on the field when UCF has had opportunities to win, and no one gave them the time of day.
Andrew, I'm going to need somebody at CBS to explain themselves on the 3-win thing. We've been over this schedule a ton. I mean, they could accidentally win 3 games. I mean, you'd have to think they got worse from last year, because it's not like the schedule is harder. They'd have to get worse from last year, like significantly worse. We're going to have to address this on another show. Man, CBS, you done it. We're going to get after them. Let's get to the last break here. When we come back, I want to talk about the totality of this offense and where it lands. James Duncan, Kyle Nash attended a practice. It is April the 9th, as we're recording this morning. They attended practice, and they've been giving us reports about Alonzo kind of sitting out and some other things that they're noting. And look, we're kind of getting a real-time feed of where this thing is headed so far this spring. But we know that it's got to move forward. How much more forward does it have to move? We'll talk about that next, right here on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Indeed and Indeed-sponsored jobs. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, your inbox is overflowing, and the one position you have is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. Indeed-sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. And the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. Listeners of Locked On UCF get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support Locked On UCF by saying you heard about Indeed right here on Locked On UCF. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market, guys. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long and use your sports knowledge in moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Andrew, the 12th best offense in the Big 12. That's what UCF was last year. They averaged 378.8 yards per game. That was 4,545 total yards on the season. Probably the most disappointing stat was only 24.3 points per game. But if you factor out the non-conference, it's actually much worse.
It's below 12.
It's much worse. When you factor out the non-conference, it's so depressing. I don't even want to talk about it. We talked about it on our previous show. But they have to get better. They have to get much better. And with an improved passing game, mind you, last year, total. Now, we talked about what Taven Jackson was able to do, but total, the Knights only mustered 2,649 yards through the air. That is a paltry 220 yards per game, clear like firmly in the bottom half of the conference in the passing game. With any improvement, as I mentioned, Barnett's numbers would have put them up there in the top 5 in conference, which would be a marked improvement for this squad. Do you think they can get there? The simple question to end the show. Can they get there with Alonzo Barnett and this group of receivers and Dylan Wade? I'm going to throw Dylan in there because I think he's going to be a significant part of the passing game this year.
Yeah, I don't think Alonzo Barnett is going to break 3,000 yards in the air. I don't think he has to. I think if he's 2,800 yards or so, and kind of say similar to where he was at 23 touchdowns. If he can, be in the 23 to 25 touchdown range and keep the interceptions in single digits, which he did last year. Granted, he played against much weaker competition. If he can pull that off, with the rest of the other pieces that are going in, I think this is easily an 8, potentially 9-win team. Far from 3 wins that some guys are projecting. I can't support that. I think 5.5 on the Vegas odds is a little conservative, but I think it goes back to the issues UCF has on paper with, especially in like the wide receiver group and stuff like that, where it's a lot of young guys that don't have a huge amount of stats to back them up. But one point, not just 5.5, but I do want to make sure that we put this up here. The 12th best odds to win the Big 12, they're coming in at plus 4,500, right behind Kansas at 11, with plus 3,500 to win the conference. Texas Tech coming in at minus 115 to win right there at the top. I don't see a lot of separation after TCU from 6th to 13. Honestly, between those teams, I think it's anybody's game there. I'm offended that Oklahoma State ranked over UCF, honestly. But look, man, that's where we're at. Yeah, you got two reasons, 2 words: Drew Mestamaker. That's why they're ranked so high compared to UCF. And that's a whole nother team, new coaching staff, kind of a new era. They were able to pull in a lot of players, but I do want to point out, a couple things that Alonzo Barnett is going to have to work on. And one is completion percentage. My magic mark is always 60%. You got to have at least 60%. And that was a mark that he missed quite a bit. In fact, he was under 50% in 2 of his games. He was 50% in 3 more games. And then under 60 in another couple of games after that. You only had 70% completion in 1 game all season. So you ended up with just under 58.5% completion percentage. Part of that, the hope is that the wide receiving room will be able to help alleviate that. But also you have the consistency of yardage. Barnett had 2 games where he had under 100 yards. Ironically, they were both wins. But he had 74 as his season low against Georgia State. He had 93 against Troy in the conference championship game. Then he had other games that were not much better. 102 yards in a loss against Louisville. 130 yards against FCS Weber State. 144 against Washington State. And then 148 against Georgia Southern. So you have a number of games where, that's sub 150, which you can't afford to have. So he needs to be able to kind of shake those off and then be able to tuck the ball and run when needed and get more than, 3.5 yards average, which if you look at his stats on that, there were about 5 games where he was under 3.5 yards per rush. In fact, you look at a couple of games, particular Old Dominion where he had 153 and 98 against Texas State, kind of skew his rushing numbers up a little bit. So consistency is going to be key for Barnett if UCF's gonna win these games against some of these tougher opponents. Remember, Big 12 has a reputation, much like the old Pac-12, where defenses go to die. There is a lot of potential for high yardage situations. It's just that they have to be able to protect the ball, make smart decisions, and score in the red zone.
Andrew, I do want to add some context to his completion percentage numbers from last year. 20 drops by JMU receivers last year.
Well, that's what
So
you know,
the upgrade in talent at receiver, I think, is going to help that quite a bit. But 20 drops is significant. So I'm expecting a much better. I'm expecting much better numbers, and for him to even be in the mid 60s, I think with completion percentage it's good with the lack of talent around him at receiver. It was pretty unbelievable. I think when you look at the numbers. So again, 20 drops is significant.
The other thing, Mike, and you and I have gone over some of the PFF stuff, and I'm sure we'll look at it again. His weakest area was the deep sidelines, which is usually a testament to your receiving group. So with UCF having, I would argue, an upgrade in raw talent compared to JMU. You can be able to stretch that sideline a little bit more and go downfield and hit those guys. I don't blame that, on Barnett as much because he can hit the deep middle. His deep middle was
really good. Yeah, we charted it out. It's pretty good.
It was the sidelines that were the problem. It's usually a wide receiver issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking at that adjusted completion percentage, if you factor out drops, he would have been 70.2% completion percentage on the season. That'll definitely get it done. So hopefully UCF has the receivers around him so that we see those numbers climb. Great conversation, my friend. Can they move the offense forward with Alonzo Barnett and the passing game? Hit the comment section after this video. We want to hear from you. What do you think? Where do they finish? Is Barnett a 3,000-yard passer, or does he flop? Drop a comment. Let us know what you think. Andrew Gluco, UCFKnightZone.com. I want to thank you for joining me today. We'll be back at you guys tomorrow with more Locked On UCF.